Hey, what's going on, guys? It's me, Weep here, back with What If Asta Was Meliodas' Son, Part 17. And here we'll be getting into the battle of Asta versus Zagreus, the demon release from the underworld, that being purgatory and the location of all demons, and the demon king, Asta's grandfather. Last time I had set the like limit to 100, so once you guys hit 100, I started working on the next part, so I have that coming out for you today. Now, let's just get started where we left off, with the Black Bulls having arrived in the capital, the location where the elves would unknowingly be summoning Zagreus. Let's get into it, shall we? This is a tale of ancient times, an era before the human and non-human worlds would forever be divided. In the kingdom of Leonis, there was a legendary order of knights, known as the SevenDeadly Sins. Dragon Sin Meliodas and Princess Elizabeth one day would come to have a son in a faraway land called the Clover Kingdom, and his name was Asta. After enduring thousands of years of torture, Meliodas and Elizabeth had escaped to this new kingdom. But what had become of the other 7 deadly sins, and what had become of Meliodas? Now, Asta, as a magic knight in the Clover Kingdom, defends the kingdom with his power to fight off the Eye of the Midnight Sun, all in order to achieve his ultimate dream, to become the Wizard King. Starting off exactly where we were last time, the elves had just begun their spell to open the door to the realm of the dead. As the Dark Castle is being summoned, everyone's wondering, what is it? Which Bavel would explain that the castle is the Shadow Palace, and that the elves will be fully reincarnated once the final magic stone is placed in this pedestal here in the Shadow Palace. Kirsch would say that he will not allow that to happen, attacking the elves, but Bavel easily stops the attack. Bavel then leaves while telling them to give it their best shot, although now it's just useless. Jack and Yanni will be discussing what they're going to do. Elves coming down from the castle, having sensed their mana, saying that they're going to stop them from interfering. At this point, Noelle, Zora, Yami, and Jack prepare to fight the elves, the Black Bulls suddenly appearing from seemingly out of nowhere, crashing into the base using the huge Black Bull and attacking the elves. Everyone that had arrived quickly checking to see if anyone at the castle is okay, which the elves would simply just start attacking them with. Thanks to luck, Vanessa, and Charmy's magic though, they're easily able to take on the elves while defending everyone else. Patoli will be witnessing all of this, Reeve saying that she'll take care of this, using her magic to teleport Vanessa, Magna, Luck, Charmy, and Sally to another dimension. Patoli and Drow would then use a spell to destroy the Black Bull's base, with Patoli heading into the Shadow Castle to begin the ritual, while leaving the rest of the work to Drawa, one of the other elves left behind. Now, inside the alternate dimension, Reeve would welcome her captives to the world under her whim. As the 5 begin to wonder about the oddities of this weird dimension, Reeve, which is the name of the elf who had taken over the leader of the Coral Peacocks' Magic Knight Squad, would explain to her captives that inside of this space, the impossible is now possible, explaining that everything exists according to her whim and her thoughts. As she suddenly has a bed the 5 are all standing on to restrain them. Reeve would then create a huge curtain that attacks all 5 of them. Reeve thinking that they're all dead, she'd be shocked to find all 5 of them still alive. Reeve figuring out that it was Vanessa's magic that's able to change the results of fate, and that's going to be problematic. Sally is amazed by everything that's happening around her, and that both Vanessa and Reeve's magic is incredible. Charmy would use her special magic to restore Vanessa's mana, and Reeve would think about how difficult it's going to become to defeat her enemies so long as Charmy and Vanessa are both in play. Both Magna and Luck would try to use their offensive magic to attack Reeve, to which she would simply deactivate the magic, having no issues blocking the attack, the spells being useless. Vanessa thinks about how bad of the situation is, and that they can only defend against Reeve, and they have to either find a way to escape this dimension, or wait till she runs out of mana. Reeve would attack, but the 5 are able to easily destroy that incoming attack, Reeve wondering if there's a limit to their mana recovery, as she begins to launch a stream of water and bladed fish at the 5. Sally would instruct both Magna and Luck to use their respective magic on the water, which would cause a huge explosion of steam from Magna's flames and lightning electrocuting the water. The others would be wondering what had even happened, Sally explaining what they did and how Reeve's magic works. As the steam clears, it would be revealed that Reeve had protected herself with a barrier. Magna saying they have to find a way out of this dimension as soon as possible. Reeve would then tell them that it's already too late. Vanessa looks to Charmy and notices she's starting to fall asleep, and Vanessa also is beginning to feel tired. Reeve would explain to them that all those within the glamour world will never awaken once they fall asleep. The dream world. As Sally thinks about Reeves looking tired is making them tired, she figures out something. Sally makes a figure out of glass with her fingers and tells Reeve to guess what they are, as glasses are suddenly created out of nowhere. And just like this, Sally would prove that Reeve is unable to control what she creates. It will simply create whatever Reeve is currently thinking about at that time, and how that'll appear. Sally then tells Reeve to create an exit, which multiple doors would suddenly appear. Sally's saying how hard it is to get rid of something that just pops into your head. The 5 mages would try to escape through the exits, which would then promptly be sealed by Reeve, so that they can't escape. As they are wondering what they're going to do, Luck would come up with an idea informing the others. Mana using his fireballs to create a huge smoke screen, Reeve clearing away the smoke easily. As the smoke clears, Reeve would notice a doll that resembles Dorothy made of Vanessa and Charmy's magic. As Reeve summons Dorothy by accident, Dorothy wakes up and tells the Black Bulls they did a good job summoning her. Along with that, she'll handle the rest. Dorothy being the leader of the Peacocks and also someone who can control the dimension. So Reeve basically summoned Dorothy's soul from within her own body. Reeve would attack Dorothy, who can blocks it, and explains how she finally has an opponent who shares the same dreams as her. Reeve and Dorothy basically enter into an endless battle until the glamour world collapses. Once the glamour world disappears, Dorothy bids the Black Bulls farewell and how much fun she had, saying that once they get back to the real world, the rest will be up to them. Mana and Luck would then attack Reeve with a huge combination spell after escaping the world, and knock them out. A little while back, after Reeve had brought the 5 to the glamour world, Patoli and Drawa had used a combination spell to destroy the Black Bull's base. Gray and Gordon using their magic to save the others from the fall. Patoli then leaving to the Shadow Palace, as I mentioned. Valtos and Raids falling behind them. The Black Bulls notice that they are running low on mana, Yami saying that they can handle this and they need to surpass their limits. The Black Bulls agreeing as Yami and Jack would then head inside the Shadow Palace themselves. It was at this point that Reeve had taken the 5 mages into the dream world with her. Drawa noticing that some of the humans have escaped and says they're going to finish them off after handling the ones here. Drawa and Eclat then using a combination spell, paralyzing all the humans. For reference, Drawa is Gauche, and Eclat is his younger sister Marie. Anyway, Eclat has the ability to use magic casts through her eyes, and can also combine her eye magic with Drawa's mirror magic to create an immense magic power. Also be impressed saying that someone else can use magic without a grimoire just like him, as she would begin to battle with Asta. Asta, in kind, also not using his grimoire, simply using the magic power within him as well. Draw would be preparing to kill them all. Asta using Lost Vein, his sword, to free himself along with Gray, Gordon, and Henry from the paralysis. Drawa, seeing Asta's sword Lost Vein, for some reason would recognize it, as he says that he's seen that sword before, as he then fires a spell at Asta saying he's going to kill him. He would say that anyone who wields that sword deserves to die, as Asta remembers that Lost Vein was originally his father's sword, wondering what Meliodas had done to the elves. Dre, Gordon, and Henry would manage to block the attack, while Asta would then reflect the spell using a full counter back at Drawa. Asta, Gray, Gordon, and Henry would then start to explain who Gauche is, as they say they're going to get him back. Drawa saying that he can tell that they're well acquainted with one another. "But I'm not out of tricks yet," he would say, as he turns to Eclat, signaling that they're going to use that technique. At this point, Asta's done with this all, and since he's there, he easily overpowers the 2 elves. Asta saying he's done playing around as he just moves forward at a wicked speed. Even before they even try to activate the spell, launching it at Asta before it's completed, Asta just using a full counter as he deactivates the spell and hits them back with it, the 2 being knocked to the ground. Asta would summon his grimoire, pulling out the Demon Destroyer blade that he had gotten from Licht, as he uses the ability slashing the 2 elves falling to the ground as their souls disperse. Yeah, there's no wholesome moment here like in the original where Drawa forgave the humans and figures that if he had met humans like these, then he could have been friends with them. Asta just straight up KOs them, and it's over. Because fodder. So they're gone. Anyway, now that Gauche and Marie would be saved, Charmy would then begin making food for for everyone else so that they could restore their mana before entering the Shadow Palace. After taking a short break outside the castle, ugħłØÞ would notice that the Shadow Palace had arrived, informing Revchi about how it's an ancient magical dimension, a door between worlds, to some would say, that contains ancient magical artifacts and treasures, grand treasures within it that were the weapons of people called the Holy Knights. Legends about them say they were some of the strongest knights in the entire world. Everyone ate their food while walking to the castle. They would decide to take care of all the enemies that are in the capital. Asta would then comment if anyone needs any healing, saying that he has plenty of mana left, Mimosa offering the same. While they heal other people, Noel would comment that Asta pushes himself way too much. As he looks up, his eyes catching hers. She then turned, noticing Sally as she asks what's she doing here. Sally commenting that Asta had promised to allow her to have her way with his body once this was all over, which would completely shock both Noel and Mimosa, the two of them just stuttering because of how that was phrased. Asta would turn, just looking at Sally weirdly, wondering why everyone's freaked out. Luck would turn, saying that there's two elves heading to their location. As the elves launch attacks at the group, Meliodas and Fungolian would show up, defeating the elves in flames. A fully healed Nozel would be watching the battle from above, commenting how the Vermilion family has returned to the battlefield. Manga would turn back, saying that it looks like the portal to the Shadow Palace is getting smaller, Mimosa informing everyone what happens to the elves when the final magic stone in the pedestal is put to place in the Shadow Palace. She'd say, "There'll be no way to save anyone who's been reincarnated at that point," she'll say. Basically, that it would erase the souls out of everyone who the elves had taken over. It's at this point that the huge group of elves from the Golden Dawn would show up, intending to kill all the humans. Meliodas thinking about how they're not going to be able to go into the portal before it closes. The groups would then begin to decide who's going into the Shadow Palace. Asta immediately say that he's going, with no one complaining, because Asta is one of the strongest people in the kingdom already by this point, and has the Demon Destroyer Sword, which is the ability to free the elves and save them. At this point, this makes Mimosa basically useless, so she doesn't have to go with, so she can stay behind, since Asta can already heal everyone else in the group. Meliodas and Fungolian, as well as Nozel, would also head with, which are all magic captain level people, and then at that point Noel would also volunteer, who Nozel would agree to take with. So the final group heading into the castle is Asta, Noel, Fungolian, Meliodas, and Nozel. They would head into the palace, and as the elves try to stop them, the Black Bulls and their group of magic knights would get in the way. Fungolian and Nozel using Salamander, and Nozel using his Silver Eagle, to fly into the Shadow Palace, carrying Noel and Meliodas with them, while Asta would fly himself behind them. As the group enters into the Shadow Palace, they would then notice the mana around them feels strange. Everyone would be feeling really weird except for Asta, who would suddenly be covering his ears. Ugh, what is this? Asta be thinking. Asta's vision would be changing, feeling blurry. There's so many new senses now going into his brain. It would feel nauseating. He'd feel sick as Asta would fall over to the ground. This being the first time Asta had ever experienced so much of the same magic conduit type that his is, besides Ban. He had only ever sensed himself, Merlin, and Ban's mana at this point. And now, basically the entire world that they had entered, this dimension, was made up of the mana that Asta himself frequencies with. Asta would then pull himself up, saying as he's okay, as blood would be coming out of his nose. Everyone would be incredibly worried. Asta healing himself and saying he's fine. They'd comment with Nozel saying that the Shadow Palace is the place between life and death, the living world and the afterlife. Asta and the others will all be split up, Asta on his own. Asta this time wouldn't have Mimosa with him, since there was no need to bring two healers, so that Mimosa moment is gone, unfortunately. But Asta is able to break through the Shadow Palace walls, just going from room to room, just looking to find the elves. Each of the elves having stationed themselves in a different room. While the group would be spreading out, all in order to defeat the boss that's at the top of the palace, Asta figures that the elves' boss is going to be licked. And this time he's finally going to be able to get his revenge, saying that they're all going to rendezvous once they reach the top with each other. Asta would reach the room directly above him, smashing through the floor as he climbs into the next room. The fight would continue, and Asta would basically just be sweeping through all of the elves that come at him from each room, not even really feeling any challenge from them at all. Outside of the Shadow Palace, the Black Bulls continued to fight the elves when Yuno and other magic knights would show up in the capital, Yuno defeating the elves that had been attacking. Zora would be thinking about how Yuno was able to help all the magic knights across the entire kingdom, and even defeat the elves here. Ban would also be waiting outside for Yuno to show up, and he too had been helping just fend off the elves until Yuno had arrived. Charmy would greet Yuno and offer him some food, Yuno noticing that his mana is recovering while he eats. Yuno asking what's going on, Ban would inform him that Asta and the others had headed down into the Shadow Palace to take on the stronger foes. Ban saying he got here a little too late to actually make it into the portal, so he just figured he'd help out here. Suddenly, Yuno's pendant would release a huge light that opens a portal into the Shadow Palace. As Yuno would then walk into the Shadow Palace, Ban would tag along with him in place of Charmy. Charmy about to follow behind them, with the rest of the mages saying they need Charmy here to help restore everyone's mana so they can heal and help the citizens. Once Ban and Yuno head into the portal, Ban would be separated from Yuno and wondering where he is. Luckily though, he could still sense Asta, as well as notice that the magic around him was way more familiar now. We must be close to purgatory, he'd think. Anyway, he knows that Asta was battling against foes with his power, and Asta would suddenly notice Ban's energy appear out of nowhere as well. Asta turning and asking why Ban's here, to which Ban would say that he'd come down to this weird place following Yuno to see if he could help out. Asta would be shocked that Yuno's somehow in here too, but would then tell Ban that all of these monsters are linked by Lyra's magic. Lyra being the elf he was currently fighting at the time, who was summoning monsters. That's the leader of the silver gray deer, who can paint stuff and turn it into real things. The elf will begin to panic, saying that he doesn't want to paint monsters to just kill humans anymore. He wants to paint a beautiful monster. Ban would offer to help Lyra out by telling him just to take a nice portrait of him, since he's already quite the monster himself. Lyra would get really angry as he smacks Ban away, and saying that he would never draw something disgusting looking like Ban. Ban gets pissed off at this and saying, fine, I was just trying to be nice anyway, and attacks with a wild fox hunt. Ban's attacks just wreck Lyra and knock him out, sending him flying to the ground with all of his magic power having been pulled out of him by Ban. A result of this is that Charmy does not know that she's half dwarf, or about her powers yet, so that has not occurred at all yet. Now that Ban and Asta had cleared their room, at Noelle's location, Noelle would be fighting Fauna, the girl who was the friend of Mars, the first antagonist of the dungeon arc. But none of her spells are having any effect on Fauna. Fauna decided to just finish Noelle off with her flames, but then Fauna would be suddenly attacked by Jack, the blade user who was also the Magic Knight captain of the Green Mantis. Fauna being shocked by the sudden appearance, Jack would express how he had finally found a woman worth ripping apart. Noelle asking why Jack had to be the one to appear, which Jack asks if she has some problem with him. Noelle turning her away and making a face saying she doesn't. Asta and Ban would decide to try and find out where Yuno was, heading down towards the top of the castle, towards where the leader of the Eye of the Midnight Sun would be, that possibly being licked. Meanwhile, at Yuno's location, the elves would comment how Yuno is luckily here, even when they had already sent others to capture him. The elves being pleased that Yuno had arrived here safely, and then tell him to hand over the magic stone. Patoli and Raya then launching spells at Yuno, but Yuno uses a huge spell to avoid all of them, by flying away at a fast speed as quick as the wind. As the elves are shocked by Yuno's enhanced speed and strength, Yuno would take this chance to attack the elves with a wind tornado, using the power of the wind spirit, Sylph. However, they'd still manage to dodge the attack, Raya noticing that Yuno's gotten far stronger, and that Yuno might even be stronger than Licht now. Suddenly, Rani would get close to Yuno and try to grab him, but Yuno manages to escape and get out of the way. Rana then getting close again without Yuno detecting him. Yuno begin to figure out that his ability is somehow to negate his own magic trace, so that it basically means his existence disappears for a few moments, meaning that Yuno can't even detect him. This would be when Yuno would try to figure out how to get away from him, as he managed to gain some distance, but Rani manages to snatch the magic stone. Raya would compliment Rani about the magic stone, saying that that was an expert use of their elven technique. Ron says that he'll now finally be able to be repaid for everything that's occurred till now. Raya would think about Ronnie and remember the kind person that Ronnie had been back in their previous lives. This is not something that a friend like this would say. Raya would ask who Ronnie truly is, Ronnie smiling and managing to wound Raya. Raya thinks about how he had known that the human revealing their location was a lie, but said nothing because he wanted to see his friends again. Raya also thinks about how the costume lying was a hole in his gut, and wonders truly who this person that had caused all this to begin with was. Patoli would ask why Ronnie did it, why? Which the person inside of this shell would begin to reveal that he's actually the devil within the 5-leaf clover. He explains how he was both between the chosen people who had possessed 2 4-leaf clover grimoires in order to create the Grimoire of Despair. As he would then places the final magic stone to the pedestal, he would explain how he had obtained what he desires, and how he'll obtain it from hell. As suddenly, Asta would sense it. A huge black mass began to appear. The soul within Ronnie would then exit its own body and force itself into this black mass. As both Yuno and Patoli notice the cold black mana, Patoli would comment that it's a devil. The devil would comment how it feels so wonderful to have a body again. Although this one's incomplete, luckily there's a little half-demon here who I can gain some strength from. My lord Meliodas. The devil tells Patoli that he can feel the same despair from him that Licht had that day. What do you mean, Patoli would say. The devil reveals that he was the one who had tricked the humans into destroying the elves. The demon saying that all the elves are fools for carrying out such a vengeance, just as he had strung them all on. Now that I've regained my body, I can go meet up with Lord Meliodas, and then we can enact our plan along this world. The plan that the King of Demons has set into play. Damn you! Patoli would say, getting angry at the devil, and fires a spell at him, using his light magic. The devil easily blocking the spell and returning it back to Patoli. Yuno would then use a spell of wind, saving Patoli and Raya from the attack. He'd be confused why Yuno saved him, with Yuno saying he's not going to let him do with Captain Vengeance's body as he pleases. The devil would comment how he had planned to deal with Yuno later, to which Yuno would reply that he's going to crush this devil to end it all, saying that he's fought a demon way stronger than you. Yuno would launch a spell at the devil, but the devil would easily destroy the spell, saying that everything's meaningless for him and his word reality magic. This would be when Yuno realizes how strong this devil's magic is and how terrifying this could be. He might not even be able to defeat him if he was alone. Suddenly, Asta and Bon would arrive, to which Yuno would say, "Asta's late." The demon would turn, seeing Asta. "Ah, yes, my lord, you're finally here. If you don't mind, I would like a little stipend of your magic power just to complete this form, nothing more. I'm sure you understand." The devil would suddenly move towards Asta, ignoring Yuno, Patoli, and Raya, as Bon would be ready for a fight, ready to intercept the attack, before suddenly Bon would be slashed in half as he gets pushed out of the way. Asta could hardly believe his eyes. What? Mom? Asta would see in one arm of this man, he would see his mother, Elizabeth, laying limp and unconscious. What did you do? The devil in front of Asta would suddenly turn, as it then falls to one knee. "My lord, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to bring you here. I could have handled them all by myself." Idiot. Zagreus, did you not sense one of the 7 deadly sins was here? Not to mention that useless grandson of mine. What are you? Shut up, boy. The words coming out of Meliodas' mouth didn't match his face. As Meliodas would turn, his eyes being full of a dark cruelty, Zagreus would explain, saying he was just going to take a smidgen of a higher royal's magic power, just in order to restore himself. Before he could say another word, Asta's lost fame would disappear from his hand, as Meliodas would have it in his. Meliodas would stab Zagreus through the heart several times, as Zagreus would fall to the ground dead before he could even react. Asta would be immediately pushed to 100% power, falling back as he pulls out all 3 of the demon swords he has, now that Lostfane's been taken from him. In one hand he holds the Demon Destroyer sword, in the other the Demon Dweller sword, and the Demon Slayer sword, all 3 anti-magic blades. I don't know who you are, but get your hands off of my mother, Asta would say. Asta would move forward at a quick speed, his demon wing being covered with anti-magic as well, double coating him with demonic power, as he slashes at Meliodas. Meliodas, with just his fingers, would grab the blade out of midair as he pulls it from Asta's hand and stabs Asta across the face with Lostfane. Asta falling over as blood pools out of the wound. Asta would turn with his left hand as he thrusts his arm towards Meliodas. Holy magic! Arc! Asta would use the purging magic of Arc, the only spell he knows from Elizabeth that's able to actually kill a demon. But this demon king, Meliodas, would simply slash the attack and smack it away, Asta's arc disappearing, as he would then say, I guess I overestimated you, boy. You can't even master 1/2 of your powers. I guess it's an issue of you have too many skills, and now you're not good at any of them. What are you? Suddenly, Lostfane would have slashed through Asta's outstretched arm that had activated Arc. Asta would fall to the ground, falling back as he clutches his arm. His arm being completely severed from his body. As he tries to use his demon power to reattach the arm, Meliodas would simply step onto his arm as he says, I'm not done with you yet. He'd begin to prepare another attack, as suddenly he turns, sensing Bond's back up. I gotta get out of here, he'd think. Bond would be about to use Gift, Bond's power that he had gained after training in Purgatory, after he had fought the Demon King the first time. However, Meliodas was not willing to take on a 2-on-1. He simply needed the girl so he could reactivate the curse and put everything back to the way it was. And now that Zagreus had arrived, the door had been opened. Meliodas would fly out of the Shadow Palace, breaking out of the portal and taking Elizabeth with him, as Asta screams, holding his arm up, saying, I'll kill you! Asta would reattach his arm, flying up as he tries to follow the pathway that Meliodas had created, as Bond would grab his leg. Bond, let me go! He took her! Bond, we have to... Bond would have a look of pain in his face, saying, gritting his teeth, Kid, you aren't ready for that yet. He'd be tightening his grip around Asta's legs. He throws him into the ground, Asta being knocked out, as Bond clutches his fist, wondering what that guy's up to now. Did it really happen? Did Meliodas do what he said he was going to? It's at this point we have a flashback to over 100 years ago in the Black Clover world, when the 7 deadly sins, aside from Escanor, had all been thrown into this world. Bond had tried to save Elaine before they were teleported, but he was never able to transfer the immortality. He was never able to bring her back from death. Bond was taken here. Meliodas, after arriving, would gather up with the rest of the group that he could find, with King and Diane having seemingly gone missing. Meliodas and Elizabeth would have happened to find Gowther, Bond, and Merlin. By this point, by the time the meeting had taken place, it had been a long time before they were able to find each other. Meliodas having already had Asta with Elizabeth for a year now. Asta was already a year old when they had finally been able to have this meeting with Bond, Merlin, and Gowther. Meliodas would explain his plan, saying that he thinks that the Demon King must have sent them here in order to break them off and drain their powers slowly, commenting that all of their magic has been getting weaker once they entered this world. Some reason after all those elves we met had fought that demon that we subjugated, and it died, something else came into this world too, almost like a vacuum. And so at that point, Bond, Elizabeth, Meliodas, and Merlin's powers had already begun to be drained. Everyone except Asta. Asta's powers for some reason just weren't able to be lowered. Maybe because he was born in this world. Meliodas would explain that their powers, while this drain was incredibly minuscule, were slowly shrinking. And that in time, it's possible the Demon King's going to wait to wear me out before he finally comes to take my body. And at that point, there will be nothing any of us can do. Even you, Bond. That's why. Meliodas would tighten his fist before letting it go soft, as he touches his son's hand, smiling down at his son, Elizabeth holding him tightly. as Meliodas would then harden his eyes, looking up to his friends, saying that, "I'm gonna leave it up to this kid," he'd say. "Once I get taken over by the Demon King, I'll probably do something to try and take Elizabeth to reactivate the spell, since neither of those two old bastards has any plan of letting us go. I'm sure Asta's going to find you guys at some point in the future, if not everyone else in the 7 Deadly Sins. So, what I'm suggesting is, the memory would fade out, as Bond finishes explaining to Asta, saying that this was all part of his dad's plan. That once Asta was strong enough, he was going to be one to rid the Demon King's soul from them forever, to defeat both the goddess race's prime deity and the Demon King. Asta would be shocked, realizing what all had happened, as he turns, gripping his fist, knowing now that that guy wasn't his dad. It was... So Gramps already took over his body then, huh? Asta would say. Asta would have tears in his eyes as he thinks, "I really wanted to meet you, Dad. I guess you're making me wait a little longer." Asta would pull himself, asking Bond what he's supposed to do exactly. Bond would put his hand on Asta's shoulder, saying, "It's your job, kid, to get strong enough to beat a god, alright? But what about Mom?" Asta would say, as Bond would then tell Asta that they have at least a month before the Demon King can execute his plan. A hole's already been opened in Purgatory here. That means that there's no way for another hole to be opened to that realm for a while. So there's no way for him to escape now. I'd say the rift here will last at least another month. But once it's fully closed, then he'll be able to escape with Meliodas and Elizabeth's bodies and return back to our original world to reclaim his glory and reinstall the curse that had originally been placed. Gah, it's all so confusing, Asta would say as he punches himself in the head. "I just want to kick that guy's ass right now," he'd say as he punches his hand to his fist. "He even took my sword," he'd say. They begin to notice around them that the elves were fading. The magic that the devil had originally used to reincarnate the elves was beginning to disappear, as the elves' bodies would fall to the ground. Totally being confused as to what was going on, wondering why, as William was now coming back into consciousness, with the elves disappearing, knowing that they had been tricked, and that the humans had never intended to hurt them all along. Patoli now saying goodbye to Licht, as the elf's soul returned to the afterlife. "We have to get out of here," Bond would say. That's closing." "But wasn't it supposed to be open for another month?" Asta would say. Bond would turn back, telling Asta that a portal that we can actually exit through will be closing now. The rift in it will still be wounded though, so... I wish Merlin was here. This is the annoying parts. God, I hate explaining things. "Alright, everyone, grab your friends, and let's get the hell out of here," Bond would say, as Asta would then pull himself up, along with grabbing William's body, Yuno, and the rest of the elves that they could. They would then fly out of the castle at the Shadow Palace, escaping through the door. Back in the real world, the reason the portal was closing for them to physically escape so fast was because Finral and Nero would be removing the magic stones from the stone tablet. By the time Nero was planning to revive the Wizard King, it would have already been over. Nero would have then turned back into Sekre, the girl from 500 years ago, as the Magic Emperor explains that the fight's already over, saying that the Demon King has emerged from Purgatory, and telling Finral about everything, saying that once they reach the capital, it'll be all up to them. He would tell him about the curse that Nero had been placed under for 500 years, the seal that Nero had placed on herself. They would drop off Finral and tell him to return to his friends, while they'll use Nero's magic to try and prolong the seal on the Shadow Palace. As the first Wizard King and Sekre would then head to the portal by the Shadow Palace, Nero using her spell to open the wound longer. The Wizard King having some understanding of what the true goal of the Demon King was, to return back to his own original world with Meliodas' his friend's body. Lumiere would then take care of all of the elves that were still outside of the Shadow Palace and had not reached the connection with the devil, and so the reincarnation rampage magic was still in place. Lumiere and Sekre taking care of it this time, and siphoning by deactivating the reincarnation magic, all the elves would be freed. Asta, now escaping out of the portal along with everyone else, would run into Lumiere, the first Wizard King, as Lumiere and Bond would recognize each other. Bond? Hey, it's you. Lady dude. It's Lumiere, he'd say. "Oh yeah, that. Sorry about that. So I guess you still are alive." I always thought you were lying about the immortal thing. Huh. I'm wondering what you're doing alive. You should have been 6 feet under for a couple hundred now, shouldn't ya? Lumiere would say his time is up, as he recognizes Asta as Meliodas' son and sees Yuno. Recognizing that Yuno must be... He'd smile, thinking that Yuno must be the reincarnation of his sister and Lick's child. Sekiro would tell Lumiere how grateful she has been to serve him as he crumbles away. Lumiere now saying goodbye to Ban for the last time, as Ban says, "See ya, old friend." And now, the reconstruction of the kingdom was to begin, with Yami and William first going to try and find Julius's body, where it had originally been buried by him and Sol, to find that there was only an empty crevice. Then they would notice a presence behind them and look, suddenly seeing that Julius is before the two in a younger body, apologizing since his magic took longer to activate than he had thought. The magic he has that sacrifices his grimoire in order for him to regain time. Yami began to complain to Julius about how he had mourned his death and his determination to avenge Julius, and then he didn't even get to fight the demon thing, but says that he is glad he can see Julius again. Julius would tell William that he has a lot to atone for since he had betrayed the kingdom. Yami wondering why Julius is even being lenient on William. Julius saying that he's partially responsible for inviting William to the Magic Knights and even made him a captain, saying that most of his plan wouldn't have even been possible without Julius helping him. Julius would tell William that his atonement will be to help him fix and save the kingdom, to which William would agree to follow him in. Sekiro had successfully, by this point, managed to open the seal in the Shadow Palace much longer, up to the point of at least making it 3 months. This will be giving Asta way more time to train and give him time to fight and defeat the Demon King Meliodas, as well as whatever demons that Meliodas has by his side, that being the Dark Triad. Of course, this is still unknown to the kingdom at this point. A couple days later, Julius would send a summon out to both Sekiro and Asta, saying that they have many things to talk about. In the letter saying to Asta that they have many things to discuss, particularly about your father. As Asta and Sekiro prepared to go to the royal capital to meet with Julius. If you guys enjoyed part 17 for What If Asta Was Meliodas' Son, thank you guys so much. This part was really a lot of exposition, so I'm sorry about that. This is where I wanted to explain what happened with the Demon King and what was going on with why Meliodas had gone to get milk and never came back and why that was. And that was because Meliodas was trying to protect both Asta and Elizabeth from the Demon King in case the Demon King would come after all of them. So he didn't want the Demon King knowing about Asta until Asta was at least powerful enough not to get destroyed. Anyway, I'm really excited to get started into going into the Dark Triad Arc and the Heart Kingdom training, where we're going to be having some fun characters popping up. So I hope you guys are ready for that, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.